Have you ever found yourself diving into a pint of ice cream or a bag of chips when stress feels overwhelming? If so, you're definitely not alone. Emotional eating is a common struggle, one we often turn to when life feels out of control. But while that quick fix may soothe us momentarily, it usually leads to regret, guilt, and even more stress. In this article, we're diving deep into why we eat our feelings and, more importantly, how to stop it. Understanding the difference between emotional and physical hunger, recognizing your triggers, and adopting healthier coping mechanisms can change your relationship with food. So, let's take this journey together and start healing from the inside out. Emotional eating happens when we reach for food to comfort ourselves, not because our bodies are physically hungry, but because our emotions are out of control. It's that all too familiar scenario where we crave something sweet or salty after a rough day. But here's the catch: this eating isn't about satisfying hunger, it's about soothing the mind and emotions. We often associate food with comfort and reward, which can become a coping mechanism in times of stress, anxiety, or sadness. According to Dr. Susan Albers, author of 50 Ways to Soothe Yourself Without Food, emotional eating is a learned behavior rooted in our need for comfort. The key is that we're not actually feeding our bodies, but rather trying to fill a deeper emotional void. Think about it. When you're genuinely hungry, any food will satisfy that hunger. But if you're turning to food when stressed, it's typically the high sugar, high fat options that call your name. That's because these foods stimulate dopamine, the feel-good hormone, offering a temporary escape from negative feelings. Yet, once that sugar high crashes, we're often left feeling worse than before. So, how do you know if you're an emotional eater? It can be tricky because eating is a natural part of our daily lives. However, some signs can help you recognize if your relationship with food leans more towards emotional dependency than physical nourishment. Here's a quick litmus test. Do you find yourself craving specific comfort foods when you're sad, stressed, or bored? Do you eat when you're not hungry, but simply to distract yourself from unpleasant feelings? If you answered yes, you might be using food as an emotional crutch. Another sign is eating impulsively without thinking, especially during intense emotions. If you've ever caught yourself in the middle of mindlessly eating an entire bag of chips, only to realize what happened after it's gone, that's emotional eating in action. The key is awareness. Once we start to notice these patterns, we can begin to break them. The emotional eating cycle is a tough one to break because it often feels like a quick fix to emotional distress. Let's break it down. Something stressful happens, a bad day at work, a fight with a friend, or just the overwhelm of daily life. Your mind goes, "I need relief, and I need it fast." That's when food enters the picture as the easy solution. It gives a rush of pleasure, distracting you from the discomfort. But here's where it gets tricky. The relief food provides is only temporary. After the fleeting comfort fades, you might feel guilty or ashamed for overeating. This guilt can spiral into more negative emotions, which then leads to, you guessed it, more emotional eating. It's a vicious cycle that can be hard to escape. Psychologist Dr. Edward Abramson, author of Emotional Eating: What You Need to Know Before Starting Another Diet, explains that the emotional eating cycle is driven by our brain's reward system. The short-term pleasure tricks us into thinking we're solving our problems, but it ultimately delays addressing the real emotional pain beneath the surface. One of the most important things we can learn is how to differentiate between emotional hunger and physical hunger. They can feel similar, but they're quite different when we look closely. Emotional hunger often strikes suddenly, like a wave crashing over you, and demands instant gratification. Think ice cream, cookies, or that big bag of chips in the pantry. In contrast, physical hunger is more gradual. It doesn't demand specific comfort foods, but simply asks for nourishment. Emotional hunger also tends to come with cravings for very specific foods, especially those that are sugary, salty, or fatty. It's almost like an itch you just have to scratch. But physical hunger is far less picky. It's satisfied with a balanced meal that provides nutrients and energy. Here's a tip. If you ate just a couple of hours ago but feel the urge to eat again, ask yourself whether your hunger is truly physical. Emotional hunger usually leaves us feeling unsatisfied even after we've eaten, whereas physical hunger ends with a sense of fulfillment. Tuning into these signals takes practice, but once we can tell the difference, it becomes easier to break free from this cycle of eating out of emotions. We often confuse emotional hunger with physical hunger, but there are key differences between the two that can help us break the cycle of emotional eating. Emotional hunger comes on suddenly. One minute you're feeling okay, and the next, you're craving something specific, usually comfort foods like chocolate, pizza, or chips. This kind of hunger often demands instant gratification and feels urgent. On the other hand, physical hunger develops more gradually. It doesn't hit you out of nowhere, and it doesn't demand a particular type of food. Instead, it's more flexible. You can satisfy it with a variety of options. If you're truly physically hungry, even a simple, nutritious meal will do the trick. You won't feel that nagging, relentless craving for one specific comfort food. Here's another major difference. Emotional hunger often leads to mindless eating. You find yourself munching without really tasting or enjoying the food, and it doesn't leave you feeling satisfied afterward. In contrast, when you eat to satisfy physical hunger, you're more likely to be mindful, savoring each bite and feeling satisfied when you're done. This difference is crucial because learning to distinguish between these types of hunger can change the way you relate to food. If you're trying to stop eating when stressed or emotionally drained, identifying your triggers is one of the most important steps. Emotional eating is often tied to specific emotions or situations. For example, do you reach for comfort food when you're bored, lonely, anxious, or overwhelmed? Understanding what triggers your urge to eat can help you create a plan to interrupt the cycle. It helps to pay attention to patterns. Keep an eye out for those moments when you're feeling especially vulnerable. Is it after a stressful meeting at work? Or maybe when you're alone at home on a Friday night? Once you're aware of these triggers, you can start to plan healthier ways to cope, like taking a walk, practicing deep breathing, or calling a friend for support. Why do we turn to food when we're feeling emotional? Well, a lot of it has to do with how our brains are wired. Eating, especially foods high in sugar and fat, releases endorphins and dopamine, which are chemicals that make us feel good temporarily. This quick burst of pleasure can distract us from whatever negative feelings we're experiencing, even if just for a moment. However, emotional eating usually doesn't resolve the actual problem we're facing, it just masks it. Stress, loneliness, anxiety, and even boredom are some of the most common triggers. In fact, a study from the American Psychological Association found that nearly 40% of adults admit to overeating or eating unhealthy foods in response to stress. Sometimes, emotional eating is rooted in our childhood experiences. If you were rewarded with sweets for good behavior or consoled with treats when you were upset, your brain may have formed a deep association between food and comfort. As adults, we might reach for that same source of comfort when we're stressed. Understanding these deeper connections can be a game changer in breaking free from emotional eating. One of the most effective ways to break free from emotional eating is by keeping an emotional eating diary. It might sound simple, but the impact can be profound. The idea is to jot down what you're feeling before you eat, what you eat, and how you feel afterward. This practice can help you identify patterns and see clearly what triggers your emotional eating episodes. Let's say you notice that every time you feel anxious about work, you find yourself mindlessly snacking on sweets. By tracking these patterns, you become more aware of your emotional responses. Over time, you'll start to see how often your eating has little to do with actual hunger. This awareness is the first step toward change. Dr. Michelle May, author of Eat What You Love What You Eat, emphasizes that journaling allows us to step back and observe our behaviors without judgment, which can lead to healthier choices. So grab a notebook or use a notes app on your phone. The key is to be consistent and honest with yourself. It's not about perfection, it's about understanding your relationship with food better. Let's be honest, food can never truly satisfy emotional needs. If you're feeling lonely, stressed, or overwhelmed, no amount of chocolate will actually solve the root issue. This is why it's essential to find other, healthier ways to comfort yourself. It's all about replacing the quick fix with long-term solutions that actually nourish you. Instead of reaching for a snack, try something that feeds your soul. Maybe it's listening to your favorite playlist, going for a walk in the park, or diving into a good book. When we fill our lives with activities that genuinely make us happy, food stops being the default source of comfort. Another powerful technique? Practice self-compassion. Many of us turn to food because we're hard on ourselves. Learning to be kinder to yourself, especially in stressful moments, can reduce the need for emotional eating. The more we embrace our feelings instead of numbing them with food, the less power those cravings will have. Finding alternatives to emotional eating isn't just about cutting out food, it's about adding more joy and connection into your life. If stress is your trigger, consider activities that help you unwind, like yoga or a hot bath. Or maybe you're feeling isolated. A quick call to a friend or even a pet cuddle session can do wonders for your mood. Sometimes, a craving can be satisfied by something as simple as sipping herbal tea or chewing gum. These small rituals can create a sense of comfort without the added calories. If you're someone who reaches for crunchy foods to release tension, try swapping chips for carrot sticks or apple slices. It's about finding substitutes that fulfill that same need in a healthier way. Engaging your senses is another great strategy. Light a scented candle, listen to calming music, or even try a short meditation. These alternatives can be just as comforting as food, helping you cope with emotions in a healthier, more sustainable way. Pause when cravings hit. Check in with yourself. When a craving strikes, it can feel like you're on autopilot, driven by a need to eat right now. But pausing for just a few minutes can make all the difference. Instead of diving into that bag of chips, take a moment to check in with yourself. Ask, am I truly hungry, or am I trying to soothe something else? This brief pause can help you break the cycle of mindless eating. Take 5 deep breaths, stretch, or drink a glass of water. This small break can help reset your mindset and reduce the urgency of the craving. Remember, cravings often pass if we give them a little time. By giving yourself space to reflect, you can better understand what your body and mind truly need. Another trick is to visualize how you'll feel after eating that comfort food. Will it really make you feel better, or will it just add to your stress? If the answer leans toward regret, it might be a sign to explore another coping mechanism. Over time, these pauses become easier, allowing you to take control of your eating habits. Take 5 before you give in to a craving. Cravings can feel overpowering, especially when you're stressed. But here's a powerful trick. Take just 5 minutes before giving in. In that short window, distract yourself with a quick activity. Step outside for a breath of fresh air, do some light stretching, or simply close your eyes and focus on your breathing. During those 5 minutes, ask yourself, am I truly hungry, or am I looking for comfort? Often, simply pausing for this brief moment allows your brain to recalibrate. When you interrupt the craving, it loses some of its power. And if after those 5 minutes you still feel hungry, it's okay to eat, but you've given yourself the gift of making a conscious choice rather than an impulsive one. Learn to accept your feelings, even the difficult ones. We've all been there. A wave of sadness, stress, or anxiety hits, and it's tempting to reach for a snack to make the feelings go away. But instead of numbing out, what if we leaned in and accepted those emotions? After all, emotions are signals. They're telling us something important. Psychologists emphasize that accepting your emotions doesn't mean you have to like them. It just means acknowledging that they exist. By letting yourself feel your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, you'll find they often lose their intensity. This practice, called emotional acceptance, can actually reduce your urge to cope with food. Try this. When you feel the pull to emotionally eat, take a moment to label your feeling, whether it's anger, sadness, or stress. Naming your emotions can give you a sense of control and reduce their impact. Over time, you'll notice that accepting your feelings allows you to find healthier ways to process them without resorting to food. Enjoy food without overeating by savoring every bite. Let's face it, food is meant to be enjoyed. The trick is to enjoy it mindfully rather than mindlessly. When you eat quickly, distracted by your phone or TV, it's easy to miss the satisfaction of your meal and end up overeating. The key is to slow down and savor each bite. How do you do this? Start by focusing on the flavors, textures, and aromas of your food. Put your fork down between bites. Chew slowly. Let yourself truly taste and appreciate what you're eating. When you're fully present during a meal, you'll often find that you need less food to feel satisfied. By practicing mindful eating, you not only reduce the likelihood of overeating, but also enhance your overall relationship with food. It's about turning mealtime into a moment of self-care rather than a rush task. Practice mindful eating for better control. Mindful eating is a practice that brings your full attention to the act of eating, helping you break free from the habit of eating on autopilot. It's about being fully present, feeling the textures, tasting the flavors, and noticing how your body feels. This awareness can make a world of difference when it comes to stopping emotional eating. Here's a tip. Before you eat, take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I eating because I'm hungry or because I'm stressed? This small pause can help you connect with your body's true needs. By slowing down, you'll also give your body time to register fullness, which helps prevent overeating. According to nutritionist Evelyn Tribal, co-author of Intuitive Eating, mindful eating allows us to reconnect with the body's natural hunger signals, which are often drowned out by stress and emotional triggers. The more we practice, the more we can tune into our bodies and make healthier choices. Support yourself with healthy lifestyle changes. Let's be real, emotional eating doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's often tied to other areas of our lives, like stress levels, sleep quality, and physical activity. When we prioritize our overall well-being, it becomes easier to resist the urge to eat our emotions. This means looking at the bigger picture and making small, sustainable changes that support your mental health. Regular exercise, even just a daily walk, releases endorphins that boost your mood and reduce stress. Getting enough sleep is another critical factor. Lack of sleep can increase levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, which can drive cravings for comfort foods. Taking time for hobbies, connecting with loved ones, and practicing self-care can all help reduce the need to turn to food for comfort. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about taking small steps to support yourself in healthier ways. When we nurture ourselves with positive habits, we're less likely to seek solace in the pantry.